Let's make a woven form using cardstock. We're thinking of vessels here, so even if it's not clay, we can think three-dimensionally. We need some sort of snack box. Even if it's in use, maybe you can wrap that up in a different way. We need scissors or something to cut with, a stapler of some sort, or maybe glue or tape, pencil, and ruler. Remove those flaps, measure out 1.5 to 1 inch marks, and then cut along those lines. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you have a paper cutter that can handle this, go for it. Otherwise, scissors work just as well. You need to create a base. I'm going to leave a slight gap in between, but this is kind of what you want to practice. Like, how does it look if I leave a smaller gap or no gap? And then these are going to be attached together. I could then think about, do I want it narrow? I'm going to end up making it wider, and so I'm leaving a gap, and I'm kind of using my hand as a guide, so about 3 of my fingers distance between. I can add additional pieces as needed, and I'm stapling each one in place. And then I'll cut off the extra. And now I can play around with the overall form. Do I need to adjust it? I'm going to go with something pretty simple, as you saw in my example, but play around. And now I'm going to weave in. So to weave in, I'm going under and over, and I'm using the contrasting side of my box here, but you could also just use the same color, so if you didn't want it to pop so much. And then once I reach the end, I'm going to trim it to fit. I need to staple these ends in place so they don't go anywhere. And then I'm just going to repeat. And the key thing here is that I'm going to start my next piece on top or under, right? So my last section, it's alternating, right? So that wherever it was under, the next layer is over, and vice versa. That's how you get that simple weave looking pattern. So you're just going to keep going around and around, trimming to fit, adding more as you go. If you end up using more than one box, you might want to mix and match if you're using the patterned or printed side, so that you have a variety, so you don't end up with maybe different bands, or maybe keep that in mind, right? Do you want to have kind of blocks of color? You might need to staple in place in a few areas just to kind of hold its shape. This is also how you would kind of play around with shape. Do you want it to flare out? Do you need to then adjust where you staple it so that it will control that form a little bit for you? So if it's flaring out, I'm adding a little more of a gap. And pause and look at it. What might you need to adjust or change? And then continue on. I find it really helpful with a stapler if I also have a staple remover, because you are probably going to need to undo and redo in some cases. You could also use tape and tack it on there, but you do want to end up with something that looks pretty neat. So I would advise, if the tape is visible, can you staple it and then remove the tape so it's not visible later. So as it gets wider, you can see there's a bigger gap in between the different woven sections. Right, so just keep that in mind. I could also go in and fill that in, but that's a little more complicated than where we're at. We're just going for something simple as we think about form and volume. And so this is basically it for this woven sort of project. We're thinking about form and volume. Even if we're not working with clay, we can think about how we can describe an object in space, and being in art, really just making things is a really key skill. It's not so much about the material all the time. It really is just about, what can I do with my hands? How can I use that to expand my knowledge? And then just being open to ideas. All right.